The only thing colder than my beer was my wife's new gym routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 sharp, Julia would grab her designer water bottle, kiss my cheek with the enthusiasm of someone paying a parking meter, and announce she was working on herself. I'm Nate Callahan, 39 years old, and I fix air conditioners for a living. Not glamorous, but it pays the bills and keeps me busy enough to ignore the growing cracks in my marriage. At least it did, until Julia's sister moved in. "Nate, honey, we need to talk," Julia said that Tuesday evening, perched on our kitchen counter like she owned the place, which technically she did, half of it anyway. "Shoot," I replied, not looking up from the invoice I was filling out. Mrs. Henderson's unit had been making sounds like a dying walrus, and I'd spent 3 hours convincing it to breathe again. "Melissa needs a place to stay for a while, just temporarily." I set down my pen. Melissa was Julia's younger sister, 34, with 3 kids and a talent for finding men who disappeared faster than my tools from job sites. "Define temporarily," I said. "A few months, maybe 6. She's getting back on her feet after the divorce. And where exactly would she and the kids sleep?" "Our guest room is the size of a closet." Julia's smile tightened. "I thought she could take the master bedroom and we could move to the guest room. It's more appropriate since she has the children." I stared at my wife. After 14 years of marriage, she could still surprise me, and not in good ways. "You want us to give up our bedroom so your sister can move in with her 3 kids and whatever boyfriend she's currently dating?" "She's not dating anyone right now," Julia said, which wasn't really an answer to my question. "Julia, our house is 1,500 square feet. Where are we supposed to put 4 extra people?" "Families help each other, Nate. I thought you understood that." The way she said it, like I was some kind of heartless bastard for questioning the logistics of housing half a daycare center in our 2-bedroom ranch. "When is this happening?" I asked. "Saturday. 3 days." She'd given me 3 days' notice that our lives were about to be turned upside down. "Did you consider asking me before you told her yes?" Julia hopped off the counter and started loading the dishwasher with more force than necessary. "I didn't think I needed permission to help my own sister." "It's not about permission, Julia. It's about communication. This affects both of us." "Everything affects both of us, Nate, but that doesn't mean we need a committee meeting for every decision." I watched her slam plates into the dishwasher and wondered when we'd started talking to each other like hostile neighbors instead of married partners. Saturday arrived with the subtlety of a freight train. Melissa showed up at 9 in the morning with a U-Haul truck, 3 kids ranging from 6 to 12, and a guy named Derek who looked like he'd stepped out of a fitness magazine and into our driveway. "I thought she wasn't dating anyone," I muttered to Julia as we watched Derek flex his way through carrying boxes. "It's complicated," Julia replied, which seemed to be her favorite phrase lately. The kids, Emma, Tyler, and little Sophie, were actually pretty good. They said please and thank you, helped carry their own stuff, and didn't immediately start tearing apart our house. Derek, on the other hand, made himself at home like he'd been paying rent for years. "Nice place you got here," he said, cracking open one of my beers without asking. "Could use some updating, though. These cabinets are pretty dated." I bit back my first 3 responses, all of which would have gotten me in trouble with Julia. "Thanks for the feedback," I said instead. By Sunday evening, our house had transformed. The living room was full of toys, the bathroom counter was covered with products I couldn't pronounce, and Derek had somehow claimed my recliner as his personal throne. "Uncle Nate," Sophie said, tugging on my shirt while I tried to watch the game, "Derek says you're gonna build us a tree house." I looked over at Derek, who was scrolling through his phone in my chair. "Did he now?" "Yeah, he said you're good with tools and stuff." "Derek's got a lot of ideas about what other people should do," I said, loud enough for him to hear. He looked up from his phone. "Just thinking the kids might like something fun in the backyard, since they'll be here for a while." The way he said it, like he was doing me a favor by suggesting I spend my weekends building playground equipment for his girlfriend's kids. "We'll see," I said, which in married guy speak means absolutely not. Monday morning brought a new routine. Julia left for her marketing job at 8. Melissa dropped the older kids at school and took Sophie to daycare, and Derek Derek seemed to have a very flexible schedule that mostly involved using our Wi-Fi and eating our food. I was in the garage organizing my tools when he wandered out around 10. "Mind if I work out back here?" he asked, already setting up what looked like a portable gym in the corner where I kept my lawnmower. "Actually, I do mind. This is where I keep my work equipment." Derek paused mid-setup. "Come on, man. I just need a little space. I can't let my routine slide just because I'm between places. Between places. Like our house was some kind of way station on his journey to somewhere better." "Find somewhere else," I said. "Julia said you'd be cool with it." Of course she did. Julia doesn't speak for me about my garage. Derek straightened up, and I got the feeling this was a conversation he'd been looking forward to. "Look, Nate, I get that this is an adjustment, but we're all adults here. We can make this work if everyone's willing to compromise." "I am compromising," I said. "I'm compromising by letting you live in my house rent-free while you figure out your life. Melissa's your wife's sister, family." "Melissa, yes, you know." Derek's jaw tightened. "Maybe we should let Julia sort this out when she gets home." "Maybe we should," I agreed. That evening's dinner conversation was about as comfortable as a root canal. Julia had picked up Chinese takeout, and we all sat around our dining room table like some kind of bizarre family reunion nobody wanted to attend. "Derek mentioned you two had a misunderstanding about the garage," Julia said, passing around containers of lo mein. "No misunderstanding," I replied. "He wanted to set up a gym in my workspace. I said no." Melissa spoke up for the first time. "Derek's really dedicated to his fitness routine. It's important for his mental health. So is my ability to do my job, which requires access to my tools." "Can't you just move some stuff around?" Julia asked. "Make a little space?" I set down my chopsticks. "Julia, that garage is how I make a living. It's not a community center." "Nobody's asking you to give up your whole garage," Derek said. "Just share a little." "I'm not sharing my workspace with someone who doesn't live here." "I do live here," Derek said. The table went quiet. Even the kids stopped eating. "Temporarily," I said. "Right, temporarily." But the way he said it didn't sound temporary at all. 2 weeks into the new living arrangement, I realized I'd lost control of my own house. Derek had somehow managed to take over not just my recliner and garage space, but also my routine, my peace of mind, and apparently, my marriage. Julia and I were barely talking except to coordinate logistics. Who was picking up groceries, whose turn it was to take out trash that now filled up twice as fast, and whether we could afford the spike in our electric bill from housing 6 people instead of 2. "We need to set some boundaries," I told Julia one morning, while Derek was in our shower, using the last of my expensive shampoo. "What kind of boundaries?" she asked, not looking up from her phone. "Time limits, house rules, basic respect for the people who actually pay the mortgage." "Nate, they're going through a difficult time. Can't you be a little more understanding?" "I'm being plenty understanding, but understanding doesn't mean I have to give up my entire life." Julia finally looked at me. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I can't watch TV in my own living room because Derek's always there. I can't work in my garage because he's turned it into his personal gym. I can't take a hot shower because 6 people are using our water heater. I can't—" "You can't what? Be a decent human being for a few months?" That stung, mostly because I'd been asking myself the same question. Was I being unreasonable? Was this what marriage meant? Sacrificing everything for people who weren't even my family? "I'm trying, Julia, but this isn't working." "Then what do you suggest?" "I suggest we set some ground rules. Derek contributes to utilities. Melissa helps with household expenses. Everyone cleans up after themselves. And my garage stays my garage." Julia sighed like I'd asked her to solve world hunger. "Fine, I'll talk to them." But she never did. Or if she did, it didn't make any difference. Derek continued to treat our house like his personal resort, and Melissa continued to treat me like the mean landlord who just didn't understand how hard life could be. Things came to a head the following Saturday. I was trying to fix our neighbor's furnace in the garage when Derek started his workout routine right next to me. The clanging of weights mixed with his grunting, mixed with the music blasting from his Bluetooth speaker, created a symphony of annoyance that made concentration impossible. "Can you keep it down?" I shouted over the noise. "I'm trying to work." Derek paused mid-rep. "It's Saturday, man. Relax. Saturday's when I catch up on side jobs. This is how I make extra money. Maybe you should get a better job then." I set down my wrench and turned to face him fully. "Excuse me? I'm just saying, if you need to work weekends to make ends meet, maybe HVAC isn't the right career choice." Derek was a personal trainer at a gym that charged $200 a month for memberships. He drove a leased BMW and lived in other people's houses. But somehow, I was the one with career problems. "Get out of my garage," I said. "Come on, don't be like that." "Get out now." Derek set down his weights slowly, like he was considering whether to escalate this into something physical. I'm not a big guy, but I'm strong from years of hauling equipment, and I was angry enough that size didn't seem to matter. "You know what your problem is, Nate?" Derek said, gathering his equipment. "You're threatened by other men. That's why you can't handle having me around." "My problem is entitled people who think the world owes them something. Maybe you should talk to someone about your anger issues." He walked out of the garage, leaving me standing there wondering how I'd become the bad guy in my own house. That evening, Julia confronted me while I was grilling burgers in the backyard, the only place I could find any peace. "Derek says you kicked him out of the garage." "Derek says a lot of things. He's just trying to maintain his fitness routine, Nate. It's not personal." "Everything he does is personal, Julia. He's marking territory like a dog." "That's ridiculous." "Is it? He's taken over my chair, my garage, my shower, my refrigerator, and now he's giving me career advice. What's next?" Julia was quiet for a moment, flipping burgers with more force than necessary. "Maybe this arrangement isn't working out," she said finally. "You think?" "I mean for us. Maybe we need some space to figure things out." I stopped what I was doing and looked at my wife. Really looked at her. When had she started wearing makeup to go to the gym? When had she started coming home from work so late? When had she started talking about space like it was something our marriage needed? "What are you saying, Julia?" "I'm saying maybe I should stay at my mom's for a while. Give everyone some room to breathe." "Everyone or just you?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. "What about Melissa and the kids?" "They can stay here. You said you wanted boundaries. Here's a boundary. I won't be here to referee between you and Derek anymore." "So your solution is to abandon ship and leave me to deal with your family?" "I'm not abandoning anything. I'm giving us both some perspective." Julia moved out that Tuesday. She packed 2 suitcases, kissed me goodbye like we were casual acquaintances, and drove away in her Honda Civic, leaving me alone with her sister, 3 kids, and Derek. The house felt different without her. Emptier, but also more honest somehow. Without Julia as a buffer, the real dynamics became clear. Melissa expected me to provide housing, utilities, food, and childcare, while contributing nothing except occasional thanks and frequent complaints about the water pressure. Derek expected me to treat him like an equal partner in a house he'd never paid a dime toward. And the kids, sweet as they were, expected me to be the fun uncle who built tree houses and took them for ice cream. I lasted 3 more days. Wednesday evening, I found Derek in my kitchen making dinner plans with Melissa while the kids did homework at my dining room table. "We should try that new steakhouse downtown," he was saying. "I heard their ribeye is amazing." "That sounds expensive," Melissa replied. "Nate won't mind watching the kids, will you, Nate?" I stood in the doorway of my own kitchen, invisible until they needed something from me. "Actually, I do mind," I said. Derek turned around, surprised. "What's that?" "I mind watching the kids while you 2 go out for expensive dinners." Melissa looked confused. "But you love the kids." "I do love the kids, but I'm not your babysitter, and I'm definitely not your ATM." "Nobody asked you to pay for dinner," Derek said. "No, you just asked me to provide free childcare so you could go spend money you don't have on food you can't afford." "Wow," Melissa said. "I didn't realize we were such a burden." And there it was. The guilt trip I'd been expecting since day 1. "You're not a burden, Melissa, but this situation has gotten out of hand." "What situation?" Derek asked. "A family helping each other out?" "You're not family," I said. You're some guy who showed up with my sister-in-law and decided to make himself at home. Derek stepped closer. Maybe that's the real problem here. Maybe you can't handle having another man in your house. Maybe you're right, I said. Maybe I can't handle having someone eat my food, use my utilities, take up my space, and then lecture me about my own inadequacies. So what are you saying? Melissa asked. I'm saying you have until Sunday to find somewhere else to live. The room went dead silent. Even the kids stopped doing homework. You can't be serious, Melissa said. I'm completely serious. Julia's going to hear about this, Derek said. Julia already heard about this. She moved out rather than deal with it. You're kicking out 3 children, Melissa said, her voice rising. What kind of man kicks out children? The kind of man who's been taken advantage of for 3 weeks and finally reached his limit. I walked out of the kitchen and went to my bedroom, the guest bedroom that used to be my office, where I now slept on a twin bed because I'd given up my master suite for people who couldn't even say thank you. Sunday came and went, nobody moved out. Monday morning, I woke up to find Derek making coffee in my kitchen like nothing had happened. He nodded at me when I walked in, casual as could be. Morning, Nate. Sleep okay? I stared at him. You're still here. Yeah, about that. Melissa talked to Julia, and Julia thinks you were a little hasty with the ultimatum. Julia doesn't live here anymore. But it's still her house too, right? Her name's on the deed. Derek was right, and he knew it. Legally, Julia had as much say as I did about who lived in our house. Practically, that meant I was stuck. Where's Melissa? I asked. Taking the kids to school. She'll be back around 9. I poured myself coffee and tried to figure out my next move. I could call a lawyer, but that seemed extreme. I could call Julia and try to reason with her, but our last 3 conversations had ended in arguments. I could accept the situation and hope it resolved itself, but that felt like giving up. Or I could make living in my house so uncomfortable that they'd want to leave on their own. I started small. I changed the Wi-Fi password and didn't share it. I locked my bedroom door when I left for work. I bought groceries for 1 person and kept them in a mini fridge in the garage. Derek noticed first. Hey, the internet's not working, he said Tuesday evening. Weird, works fine for me. What's the password? I changed it, security reasons. Can you give me the new one? No. Derek stared at me. You're really going to be petty about Wi-Fi? I'm going to be careful about who has access to my personal accounts. It's just internet, man. Then you can get your own. Wednesday brought a new complaint from Melissa. The hot water ran out while Sophie was in the bath, she said when I got home from work. That's unfortunate. It's the 2nd time this week. Maybe try shorter showers or stagger bath times. Or maybe you could call a plumber and fix the water heater. The water heater works fine for 2 people. It's not designed for 6. Melissa crossed her arms. So what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you figure out how to work within the limitations of the house you're living in for free. Julia said you'd be supportive. Julia says a lot of things lately. By Thursday, the tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Derek had started making pointed comments about passive-aggressive behavior and toxic masculinity. Melissa had started making equally pointed comments about family loyalty and Christian charity. The kids had started asking when they could go home. I was beginning to think my plan was working when Julia showed up Friday evening. We need to talk, she said, standing on our front porch like a stranger. Come in, I said. It's your house too, apparently. We sat in the living room, which looked like a daycare center had exploded. Toys everywhere, juice boxes on the coffee table, cartoons playing on the TV. Derek says you're making their lives miserable, Julia said. Derek says a lot of things. Nate, this is childish. They're family. He's not family. And even if he was, family doesn't mean I have to set myself on fire to keep other people warm. Julia sighed. What happened to you? You used to be kind. I used to be a lot of things. I used to have a wife who consulted me before making major decisions. I used to have a house where I could relax after work. I used to have a marriage where I felt like an equal partner. This isn't about our marriage. Isn't it? You moved your sister and her boyfriend into our house without asking me. When I objected, you moved out. Now you're taking their side against me. How is this not about our marriage? Julia was quiet for a long moment. Maybe we should consider a trial separation, she said finally. Maybe we should consider couples therapy. I don't think therapy can fix this. We haven't tried. Nate, I'm not happy. I haven't been happy for a long time. There it was. The truth I'd been avoiding for months. Since when? I don't know. Since we stopped talking about anything except bills and schedules. Since we stopped having fun together. Since we became roommates instead of lovers. And you think the solution is to separate? I think the solution is for both of us to figure out what we want. I want my wife back. I want to feel alive again. We sat in silence, listening to the sounds of other people living in our house. Melissa was giving the kids baths upstairs. Derek was watching sports in what used to be our bedroom. The dishwasher was running, full of dishes I hadn't dirtied. If we separate, I said, what happens to them? They stay here until Melissa gets back on her feet. For how long? However long it takes. And I'm supposed to support 4 extra people on my salary while you figure out whether you want to be married? It's temporary, Nate. Everything's temporary, Julia. That doesn't make it fair. She stood up. I'm going to pack some more clothes. How long will you be gone? I don't know. After Julia left, I sat in my living room surrounded by other people's belongings and tried to figure out how my life had gotten so far off track. 6 months ago, my biggest worry was whether to upgrade my work van. Now I was facing a separation, bankruptcy from supporting 6 people, and the possibility of losing everything I'd worked for. That's when I remembered Pete. Pete Kowalski owned a bar called Murphy's about 10 minutes from my house. We'd been friends since high school, and he was the kind of guy who gave good advice and better whiskey. I found him Friday night behind the bar, polishing glasses and listening to a regular complain about his ex-wife. Well, look what the cat dragged in, Pete said when he saw me. Heard you're running a boarding house now. News travels fast. Small town, big mouths, what can I get you? Something strong enough to make the last month make sense. Pete poured 2 fingers of bourbon and set it in front of me. That bad, huh? I told him everything. The sister-in-law, Derek, Julia moving out, the ultimatum that nobody respected, the separation threat. Pete listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or refilling my glass. So let me get this straight, he said when I finished. Your wife moved her sister and some random guy into your house, then moved out herself when you complained, and now she wants a separation but expects you to keep housing her family. That's about the size of it. And you're wondering if you're being unreasonable? The thought had crossed my mind. Pete laughed. Buddy, you're not being unreasonable. You're being played. What do you mean? I mean your wife found a way to get rid of her sister's problems and her husband problems at the same time. She dumps the family on you, moves out to find herself, and if things don't work out, she can always come back and blame you for not being supportive enough. I'd never thought of it that way, but it made a disturbing amount of sense. So what do? You stop playing defense and start playing offense. Meaning? Pete leaned across the bar. Meaning you make it clear that actions have consequences. She wants to separate? Fine. But separation means she doesn't get to make decisions about your house anymore. She wants to leave? Fine. But she doesn't get to stick you with her family's problems. How do I do that without looking like the bad guy? Who cares how you look? You think Derek cares how he looks when he's eating your food and sleeping in your bed? You think Melissa cares how she looks when she's letting her boyfriend disrespect you in your own house? You think Julia cares how she looks when she abandons her marriage to go find herself? Pete was right. I'd been so worried about being the good guy that I'd forgotten to protect myself. Time to get mean, buddy, Pete said. Time to remind everyone whose name is on the mortgage. I went home that night with a new perspective and a plan. If Julia wanted to separate, we'd separate properly, with lawyers, paperwork, and clear boundaries about who was responsible for what. Saturday morning, I called 3 attorneys and set up consultations for the following week. Then I sat down with Melissa while Derek was at the gym and the kids were watching cartoons. We need to talk, I said. Melissa looked up from her phone. About what? About Julia and me separating and what that means for your living situation. Her face went pale. You're getting divorced? We're separating. And since Julia won't be living here anymore, Her family arrangements are no longer my responsibility. But she said we could stay until I got back on my feet. Julia doesn't live here anymore. She can't make promises about my house. It's her house, too. Not if we separate. I'll be buying out her half or selling the place. Either way, you need to start making other plans. Melissa started crying. Where are we supposed to go? I don't have anywhere else. I felt bad for about 30 seconds, then remembered that her problems weren't my fault. That's something you'll need to figure out. I'm giving you 30 days notice. 30 days? That's not enough time. It's more time than you gave me when you moved in. That's different. We're family. You're Julia's family. Julia and I are separating. See how that works? When Derek got home from the gym, Melissa filled him in. He came looking for me in the garage, where I was organizing tools and pretending to work. Heard you're kicking us out, he said. Heard you're not my problem anymore. That's cold, man, even for you. You know what's cold? Moving into someone's house and treating them like a servant, eating their food, using their utilities, taking their space, and then acting like they're the problem when they object. We never asked you to take care of us. You never offered to take care of yourselves either. Derek stepped closer. You think you're pretty tough, don't you? I think I'm pretty tired of being disrespected in my own house. Maybe you should have thought about that before you married into a family that actually cares about each other. Maybe you should have thought about getting your own place before you started playing house with someone else's sister-in-law. For a second, I thought Derek might take a swing at me. His hands clenched into fists, and he took another step forward. But then he seemed to remember that this was my house, my garage, and my tools surrounding us. You're going to regret this, he said. I regret a lot of things. Letting you move in here tops the list. Derek left, and I went back to organizing my tools. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was in control of something. That evening, Julia called. Melissa says you're kicking them out. I'm ending an arrangement that was supposed to be temporary. 30 days isn't enough time for her to find a place. How much time do I need to give people who aren't paying rent, aren't my family, and aren't my responsibility? They are your responsibility. I made them your responsibility when I asked you to help. You didn't ask, Julia. You told, and now you're separated from me, so your commitments aren't my commitments anymore. We're not divorced yet, but we're not together either. You can't have it both ways. Julia was quiet for a moment. What if I came back? To visit? To stay, to work on our marriage. I thought about it. A week ago, that's all I would have wanted to hear. What about Derek? What about him? Is he part of the package deal? He's with Melissa. That's not what I asked. Another long pause. It's complicated. No, Julia, it's not complicated. Either you want to work on our marriage, or you want to keep playing house with your sister and her boyfriend. You can't do both. You're being unreasonable. I'm being clear. If you want to come back, you come back alone. Melissa and Derek find somewhere else to live. We go to counseling. We work on our problems like married adults. And if I don't, then you don't, but you also don't get to make decisions about my house anymore. It's my house too. Then buy me out or sell it, but stop pretending you can live somewhere else and still control what happens here. Julia hung up without saying goodbye. Sunday morning, I woke up to find Derek loading boxes into his BMW. Going somewhere? I asked. Melissa's mom said we could stay with her for a while. That's great news. Derek slammed the trunk harder than necessary. You know what your problem is, Nate? I'm sure you're going to tell me. You don't know how to be part of a team. Everything's about you and what you want. You're right, I said. It is about me and what I want. In my house that I pay for, that I work to maintain. Crazy concept, I know. No wonder Julia left you. That one hit home, but I didn't let it show. Julia left me because she wanted to find herself. Turns out what she found was a husband who wouldn't be her doormat anymore. Derek got in his car and drove away without another word. Melissa and the kids followed in her minivan an hour later. She didn't say goodbye either, just loaded up her stuff and left. By Sunday evening, my house was quiet for the first time in over a month. I sat in my recliner, drinking a beer and watching TV without cartoons or workout music or arguments about hot water. It felt like winning and losing at the same time. Monday morning, Julia called again. I heard they moved out. They did. Melissa's really upset. Melissa will be fine. She always lands on her feet. She says Derek's talking about breaking up with her. That's between them. Nate, she's my sister. And I'm your husband, or was anyway. What's that supposed to mean? It means you chose your sister over your marriage. Now you get to live with that choice. I didn't choose anyone over anyone. Sure you did. When you moved them in without asking me. When you moved out instead of working with me. When you threatened separation because I wouldn't be their unpaid landlord. Every step of the way, you chose them over me. That's not fair. Fair would have been you asking me before you invited 4 people to live in our house. Fair would have been setting boundaries from day one. Fair would have been supporting your husband instead of treating him like the problem. Julia started crying. I don't know how to fix this. I told you how to fix it. Come home, alone. Let's go to counseling and work on our marriage. I can't abandon Melissa when she needs me. Then don't abandon her. But don't expect me to support her either. So that's it? Choose between my husband and my sister? No, Julia. Choose between being married and being single. If you're married, you act married. If you're single, you act single. But you don't get to act single while expecting me to act married. She hung up again. Tuesday, I met with the first lawyer. She was a sharp woman in her 50s, who listened to my story without judgment and gave me practical advice. In a separation, you can't force your wife to move back in, but you also can't be forced to support her extended family, she said. If she wants to maintain separate households, she needs to maintain her own household. What about the house? If you can afford the mortgage on your own, you can stay. If not, you'll need to sell and split the proceeds. And if she contests the separation, she can contest it, but she can't force you to reconcile. She also can't force you to house her relatives. I left the lawyer's office feeling better than I had in weeks. I had options, I had rights, I had a plan. Wednesday evening, I was grilling a steak in my backyard when my neighbor, Tom Richardson, came over to chat. Heard Julia moved out, he said. News travels fast. Small neighborhood. How you holding up? Better than expected. Tom nodded. Can't say I blame you. That Derek character was a piece of work. You noticed that, huh? Hard not to. Guy acted like he owned the place. We talked for a while about work, sports, and neighborhood gossip. It felt good to have a normal conversation with someone who wasn't asking me for anything. You know, Tom said as he was leaving, my brother went through something similar a few years back. Wife's family moved in, took over his house, treated him like garbage. He tried to make it work for months. What happened? He finally realized that being a good guy doesn't mean being a doormat. Sometimes you have to choose between being liked and being respected. Which did he choose? Tom smiled. He chose respect. Took him a while to find someone who appreciated it, but he's happier now than he's been in years. That night, I slept better than I had since this whole mess started. My house was quiet, my bills were manageable, and my future was starting to look like something I could control. But I should have known it wouldn't be that easy. Thursday morning, I got a call from Pete. You need to get down here, he said. Now. What's wrong? Just get down here. I found Pete behind the bar, angrier than I'd ever seen him. Your wife and her boyfriend were here last night, he said. Derek's not her boyfriend, he's with her sister. Pete gave me a look. Nate, buddy, I've been tending bar for 15 years. I know what I saw. My stomach dropped. What did you see? I saw Julia and Derek having dinner at table 6, holding hands, kissing, acting like a couple. They were here for 2 hours. I sat down hard on a bar stool. You're sure it was them? Dead sure, and that's not the worst part. There's a worse part? They were talking about you, loud enough for half the bar to hear. Derek was going on about what a loser you are, how you can't satisfy a woman, how Julia deserves better. She was laughing and agreeing with him. The room started spinning. What else did they say? Derek was bragging about how he'd been screwing your wife for months, how the whole gym thing was just cover, how moving in with her sister was his idea so they could be together without you catching on. I thought I might throw up. Did anyone else hear this? Everyone heard it, Nate. They weren't exactly being discreet. I put my head in my hands and tried to process what Pete was telling me. My wife hadn't left me for space or self-discovery. She'd left me for Derek. The whole sister-in-law situation had been an elaborate setup so Julia could have an affair in my own house. "There's more," Pete said gently. "More?" "They were planning something. Derek kept talking about how they were going to finish this and how you'd never see it coming. Julia kept telling him to keep his voice down, but she wasn't disagreeing." "Finish what?" "I don't know, but it didn't sound friendly." I drove home in a daze, trying to figure out how I'd been so blind. All those late nights at the gym, all those work emergencies, all those times Derek had been in my house, using my shower, sleeping in my bed. He hadn't just been freeloading, he'd been screwing my wife. And I'd been the idiot husband who never caught on. When I got home, there was a car in my driveway I didn't recognize. I walked into my house to find Julia sitting at my kitchen table with a man in an expensive suit. "Nate," Julia said, standing up. "This is my attorney, Mr. Patterson." "Your attorney?" "We need to discuss the separation terms." I looked at the lawyer, then back at Julia. "I thought we were going to try counseling." "I've decided that's not going to work." "When did you decide that?" "Recently." Mr. Patterson opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. "Mr. Callahan, we're prepared to offer you a very generous settlement," he said. "Settlement for what?" "Mrs. Callahan is filing for divorce on grounds of mental cruelty and abandonment." I stared at Julia. "Mental cruelty? Abandonment? I never abandoned you. You moved out. You forced me to move out by creating a hostile environment for my family." "Your family? Derek's not your family." Julia's face flushed. "Derek is with Melissa." "That's interesting, because Pete saw you two at Murphy's last night, and you weren't acting like in-laws." The room went dead quiet. Mr. Patterson looked at Julia, then at me. "Perhaps we should focus on the settlement terms," he said. "What settlement terms?" I asked. "Mrs. Callahan is willing to give up her claim to the house in exchange for half your retirement savings and ongoing spousal support." "How much spousal support?" $2,000 a month for 5 years. I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. "Let me get this straight. Julia cheats on me with Derek, lies about it, uses her sister as cover, and now wants me to pay her $2,000 a month for the privilege of getting divorced?" "Mrs. Callahan hasn't admitted to any extramarital relationships," Mr. Patterson said. "She doesn't need to admit it. Half the town saw her making out with Derek at Murphy's last night." Julia stood up. "We're done here." "No," I said. "We're not done. You want a divorce? Fine. But you're not getting a dime in spousal support, and you're sure as hell not getting half my retirement." The law says a lot of things about adultery, too," I interrupted. "Want to see how that plays out in court?" Mr. Patterson packed up his papers. "We'll be in touch." After they left, I called my own lawyer and told her what had happened. "Do you have proof of the affair?" she asked. "Eyewitness testimony from a bar full of people." "That's a start, but we'll need more if we want to use it in court." "What kind of more?" "Photos, texts, emails, financial records showing they've been spending money together. The more evidence you have, the stronger your position." I spent the weekend thinking about evidence and revenge and how to protect myself from people who'd been planning my downfall while living in my house and eating my food. By Monday morning, I had a plan. I started with social media. Julia had always been careful about her online presence, but Derek wasn't. His Instagram was full of photos from the last 2 months, photos that told a very different story than the one they'd been selling me. There was Derek at a restaurant I recognized, the same restaurant where Julia had claimed to be having a work dinner. There was Derek at the movies, the same night Julia said she was working late. There was Derek at a hotel pool, the same weekend Julia said she was visiting her college roommate. But the best photo was from 3 weeks ago, Derek and Julia at a concert, his arm around her waist, both of them smiling like teenagers. The timestamp showed it was taken at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. The same Tuesday, Julia had told me she was at the gym. I screenshotted everything and sent it to my lawyer. Next, I checked our joint credit card statements. Julia had been careful, but not careful enough. There were charges at restaurants I'd never been to, hotels I'd never stayed at, stores I'd never shopped at, all on days when Julia claimed to be somewhere else, all in amounts that suggested she wasn't alone. The pattern was clear once I knew what to look for. Julia and Derek had been having an affair for at least 3 months, probably longer. The sister-in-law situation hadn't been about family loyalty. It had been about giving them cover to be together in my own house. I'd been played, but I wasn't going to stay played. Wednesday evening, I drove to the gym where Derek worked. I didn't go inside, I just sat in my truck and watched. At 7 p.m., Julia's Honda pulled into the parking lot. She went inside, stayed for exactly 30 minutes, then came out with Derek. They got in his BMW and drove to a restaurant downtown. I followed them, took photos of them holding hands across the table, kissing in the parking lot, and driving to a motel on the other side of town. I sat outside that motel for 2 hours, documenting everything. By the time I drove home, I had enough evidence to destroy Julia's divorce case and probably Derek's job, too. But I wasn't done yet. Thursday, I called Melissa. "Nate?" She sounded surprised to hear from me. "Hi, Melissa. How are you settling in at your mom's?" "It's crowded, but we're managing. Why?" "I wanted to ask you about Derek." "What about him? Has he been acting strange lately? Distant, maybe?" There was a long pause. "Why would you ask that?" "Because I think you deserve to know what kind of man you're involved with." "What are you talking about?" I told her about the photos, the credit card charges, the motel. I told her about Pete seeing them together at Murphy's. I told her everything. Melissa started crying. "You're lying!" "I wish I was. I can send you the photos if you want to see them." No, I don't want to see them." "Melissa, I'm sorry. I know this is hard to hear." "How long?" she whispered. "At least 3 months, maybe longer." "Oh God, the kids. They really like him." "I know, I'm sorry. Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve better. Because your kids deserve better. Because Derek and Julia deserve to face the consequences of what they've done." Melissa hung up, but I knew she'd confront Derek. And when she did, their whole house of cards would come tumbling down. Friday morning, my phone started ringing at 6 a.m. It was Julia, and she was furious. "What did you tell Melissa?" "I told her the truth." "You had no right." "I had every right. She's been living a lie, just like I was." "Derek says you've been stalking them." "Derek says a lot of things. Most of them are lies." "This is harassment, Nate." "No, Julia, this is consequences. You want to cheat on your husband? Fine. You want to lie about it? Fine. You want to use your sister as cover? Fine. But you don't get to do all that and then act like the victim when you get caught. We're going to get a restraining order." "Good luck with that. I haven't threatened anyone. I haven't contacted anyone except Melissa, and everything I told her was true. But you go ahead and file that restraining order. I'm sure the judge will be very interested in hearing about your affair." Julia hung up, but she called back an hour later. "Derek's gone," she said, crying. "Gone where?" "I don't know. Melissa confronted him last night and he packed up and left. He won't answer his phone." "I'm sorry to hear that." "No, you're not. She was right. I wasn't sorry at all." "What do you want from me, Julia?" "I want you to fix this." "Fix what? Your affair, your lies, your plan to take me for half my retirement?" "I want my marriage back." "You should have thought about that before you started screwing Derek." "It was a mistake." "It was a choice you made every day for months." "Can't we try counseling? Can't we work this out?" "No, Julia, we can't." "Please, Nate, I love you." "You love the idea of not having to face the consequences of what you've done. That's not the same thing." I hung up and turned off my phone. For the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Saturday morning, I was having coffee in my kitchen when someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find Derek standing on my porch, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "We need to talk," he said. "No, we don't." I started to close the door, but Derek put his hand against it. "You destroyed my relationship. You destroyed your relationship when you started sleeping with my wife. Julia and I are in love. Julia and you are liars. She's leaving you anyway. Then she can leave, but she's not taking my money with her." Derek pushed harder against the door. "You think you've won something here?" "I think I've exposed something. What happens next is up to the lawyers." "This isn't over." "Yeah, Derek, it is." I closed the door and locked it. Through the window, I watched Derek stand on my porch for another minute before walking back to his car and driving away. I never saw him again. The divorce took 6 months to finalize, Julia fought it at first, trying to claim I'd been emotionally abusive, trying to get spousal support, trying to get half of everything. But the evidence of her affair was overwhelming, and eventually, her lawyer convinced her to take a simple division of assets and walk away. She kept her car, her clothes, and half the value of the house. I kept the house, my retirement, my tools, and my self-respect. Melissa sent me a card 6 months later, thanking me for telling her the truth about Derek. She'd moved to another state with the kids and was doing well. She never mentioned Julia. I ran into Pete at the grocery store last week. He asked how I was doing. Better than I expected, I told him. Any regrets? I thought about it. Just one. What's that? I regret not seeing through their lies sooner. Pete nodded. Sometimes the people closest to us are the hardest to see clearly. Yeah, I said. But once you see them clearly, everything else becomes pretty simple. I went home to my quiet house, sat in my recliner, and turned on the game. For the first time in over a year, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged.